recording from now. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. I did this MBA course last week and I don't think I had any problems. So I wonder, and it was the same settings. So I wonder if it's not something on the student side. Okay, so yeah, so anyway, first two lectures, it's going to be about the just kind of light topics about macroeconomics and growth. And then moving forward, we'll have basically two sections, growth and then business cycle. So in the growth section, we're going to talk about a series of growth models up to lesson 7. And then starting in lesson 8, we're going to start talking about models of the business cycle. And then finally, we're going to end the course with some talk about international macro. Everything before lesson 11 is really about a closed economy. And then starting in lesson 12, we're going to talk about some open economy macro. So that's the syllabus. Yeah, so I assume that you guys have some basic level of math, or I should say. I think that you guys will all be fine with this much math, so I'm not too worried about that. If you feel uncomfortable, there's a couple of sources you can look at here to help. And then also, I assume that you've all had a intro macroeconomics course, basically some undergrad macro. I'm not sure if I'm going to talk about that later, but I actually never had undergraduate macro, so I just taught this course for the first time. I must say it was pretty interesting. I sort of got a little window into a different way of thinking about macroeconomics that we're going to talk about more in an activity today. Okay, anyway. If you want to know more about some of the topics, so especially this one, this Lundquist and Sargent, this is like a PhD level macro. So then they'll take the topics in this course and they'll sort of elaborate on them even more, especially mathematically. So if you're interested in that, you can look at this textbook or really just ask me. You know, I've been in the game for a while now, so I have some idea about where to look for various topics. So yeah. I think I already mentioned some of this, just some things I didn't mention. You don't have to read these chapters. Oh, look, I've got 2012 here. You don't have to read these chapters from like the whole thing, especially when we get to later chapters like chapter 7 and chapter 6. It's kind of like the chapters are almost like a cookbook full of like different models, and we're going to choose one of them, and that's going to be the one that I'm going to present and also the one that will be on your exam. So you know, I'll be specific about which parts when we get closer to those chapters. But let me just mention that you don't have to read all the chapters through. It's only the parts that we cover in class that will be on the exam. Of course, you're welcome to if you want. And then, yeah, so we've got all these, I say 15, but I actually think it's 14 two-hour sessions. Maybe it's 15. But then we've also got 1 hour in each session that's going to be an exercise class. So I've got it down here. First exercise classes today, unfortunately, the classes are a little bit switched. Usually the first class, I don't like to have an exercise class, but that class was supposed to be last week. But because I was teaching this intensive course, it had to be moved to this week. So now actually it's tomorrow is the class formally without an exercise class. Anyway, there's going to be 4 problem sets. All right. And you can do those in groups of 3 students. I think you can do them in groups of less students too, if you want, but I think you can't go over 3 without special permission. And you have to get 3 out of 4 handed in by the deadline and approved by me in order to sit on the exam. So you definitely want to do these. What I expect is not that you are able to solve all of the problems perfectly, but I expect that you'll make a serious attempt at solving all the problems. So I'm not going to like go through and carefully check all of your answers. I'm going to kind of go through and make sure it looks like you made some serious attempt at solving the problems. So yeah, that's all. I'm only going to spot check really.
David.
Yeah.
So the course description says that we can do the problem sets in groups of 2 to 4 students. I think some of us already did make groups of 4, but I mean, we can.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
If it's said that in the course description, like
Yeah.
the official one, then that's what it is, and I'm wrong here.
Okay.
So
good. Yeah. Thanks.
that was wrong. Sorry. I should change that. In fact, make a note that I should change this slide to match the course description. So change slide 5 in intro to match course description. Okay, yeah, and then now that I talked about the problem sets, typically I'm going to go over the problem sets in the exercise class. So the idea would be like, after you hand in the first problem set, then for the next several exercise classes, I'll solve problems out of that problem set. I already mentioned this. We're going to, wow, that's pretty funny. I went through and updated these slides, but I clearly didn't totally update them completely. So there's going to be 2 general lectures today and tomorrow. That's still true. But I don't call this one capitalism. How has it been so far? Which is pretty funny. I now call it, I call this things are going better than you think. I don't necessarily need to put the word capitalism on it. And then thinking like a macroeconomist and economic modeling. So I'll talk about thinking like a macroeconomist today. And then, as I said, if we make it, we'll talk about some puzzles in international macro at the end of the course. Okay, office hours. So this is a little bit up for discussion as well about how we want to handle this, but generally Friday mornings are good for me. So I think what will be easiest is if you want to chat with me about something in the course, send me an email and then I'll give you like a half an hour slot on Friday at some appropriate time. Or alternatively, we can have sort of an open Zoom room and then people can come in if you want to hear about other people's questions. In my experience, people usually don't take advantage of the office hours until towards the end of the course when the exam starts getting closer. But so I think that at least to begin, just send me an email and we'll send something up. And then maybe toward the end of the course, we'll start having more open sort of Zoom rooms where I'll just be around and then can answer questions. Yeah, this is an old slide from actually even the guy who had the course before me, but I don't know where he got the data. But he mentions that there's a strong correlation between the grade people get on a course and how much they study. Or not how much, yeah, how much they study, how much do they prepare for each lecture. So, if you read a little bit about what we're going to cover in the lecture before the lecture, then students that do that tend to get better grades. Of course, this is just a correlation. It's not causal. So I don't want to read too much into it, but yeah, there that relationship is. All right, some changes since last year. So last year, I was planning on doing the course just as a standard in-person course. And then it got sort of suddenly shifted online. So basically what I ended up doing is taking the lectures that I was going to give and recording them and then putting them on YouTube. Let me see if I have a slide about that. Sorry, let me just zoom here. Okay, I do have something there. So I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. We need to think about what the best way to spend our time together is. Okay, so one thing that I've learned from the other online courses that I've taught is that it's very difficult for students to, pay attention for 2 hours of lecture. I think it's it's partly that when you're in class, well, there's a couple things. One is that when you're in class, you're sort of captive. Like I have you there, and and I'm looking at you, and you're looking at me, and I'm talking like to you and at you, and then people ask questions, and then there's discussion and stuff that just kind of comes up. That tends to happen less in Zoom lectures. So I just think that that's, it's to do 2 hours straight of lecture is not ideal. So what I'll try to do is I'll try to have group activities. that can kind of break up the lectures a little bit during the Zoom course. But the logistics of how actually to do that, I haven't totally thought through yet. So, one issue is that traditionally I've used the exercise classes as a chance to solve the problem sets. So we'll have to think about what the right way to do all this is. But we'll get back to that in a minute. Okay, so one thing I always like to say is student evaluations are really important, especially when I'm starting a new course. So this course has gone on for a number of years, although it's only been online really last year. But from next year again, it's probably going to be in person, hopefully. So what did I get from the student evaluations last year? It was a weird year. So I think that the students kind of were not super critical of how we faculty sort of did the online portion of the courses, because we didn't have any time to prepare, and we didn't design them to be online courses. So I didn't really get a lot of comments about what I did. So I think I mentioned, but what I did last year was I basically just recorded all of my lectures, and then I had a once a week meeting where students could ask me questions about the lectures, and that worked okay, I guess. Generally, the student evaluations are really helpful. So I always kind of try to get you guys to be sure to fill them out, because they really help me to improve the course. But you guys have a weird year because, like I said, hopefully I won't be doing this course again online. I think it works better in person. But anyway, I guess I still encourage you to fill out the evaluations when they do come up. Your program has a very weird way of doing student evaluations. I don't understand why they do it this way, but they want you to fill them out before the course ends. So it's like 1 or 2 weeks before the course ends. And I think the idea is that I'm supposed to sort of talk about them like in the last week of the course. But, to me, it's just a weird way of doing it, because by the time the last week of the course rolls around, it's too late for me to fix anything that the students found problematic about the course. So I don't really think it matters. And then because it's different than all the other courses, it's like I'm not ready for it typically when it happens. And then, students also, I think, are surprised when it arrives. So when you do get the course evaluations, please do remind me that you have now got your access to the course evaluations. I don't see it. And then that way I can sort of remind you guys to fill them out, and maybe even set aside some class time for you to fill out those course evaluations. All right, Canvas. So, now that this is an online course, Canvas becomes like even more important than it would be if it was a standard physical course. So I'm still learning. It's a new system. We've had it for like a year and a half. Let me know if there's something that I could do better. Like last week when I started the course, I thought I had posted all this stuff beforehand, but then they told me, oh no, I didn't click on like an extra button that makes it visible so the students can view it. So stuff like that, I just don't know. And then also Zoom. So you said some people are having trouble getting on Zoom. Do I have a setting wrong? Could I have a different setting that would make things work better? Just let me know about those things. And also on Canvas, I will post things. Let me know if there's something else you'd like me to post. So I know one thing I want to post soon is a mock exam, or maybe last year's exam, although I don't think I have a solution guide for that yet. But yeah, so let me know if there's something that you would like to see on Zoom or on Canvas that I don't have there, and I'll try to post that. Okay, so despite what you might have heard, economics can occasionally be a bit dry. So I like to keep the energy up. That's going to be so hard. I can tell. Even for me, I'm just looking at a sea of names. It's almost like talking to myself. But usually I like to try to spice things up with a competition and try to do a Kahoot once a day about whatever we've been learning. It's something I've never done on Zoom, so maybe we can even try one. I'll try one. Let's try one at the end of this. I've got one more slide, it looks like. So let me finish my next slide, and then we'll try the Kahoot just to see if it works. Yeah, I might even skip it because I want to Yeah, we'll try it. Okay, so anyway, so YouTube. So what I did last year is I recorded all of my lectures and I put them on YouTube. Okay, so you can actually, here I just searched on YouTube for David Jenkins, and then this is my work account. And you can see that I have pretty much slides. I mean, it's not pretty much, it's actually, I've got the entire course of lectures uploaded on YouTube, and it's not even problem sets. Maybe I should take those down. But then I can reuse questions. But anyway, you can see I've got a lot of stuff here. So the idea would be, the course is not going to be very different from the course last year. So I already have all of the lectures recorded. So I'm not sure how best to use our time together. At the moment, I'm thinking about just doing the lectures again, but I mean, I can see that it's not going to be very interactive. I'm not sure if it's going to be much different than the YouTube lectures, except that you'll be able to ask questions. So, so one thing I know that students do not want, and I understand this. Oh, let's see what I have here. Search my name. Oh, so the first few lectures that I recorded on YouTube last year, they have some background music. I thought that was, you know, I thought I was being a cool YouTuber like the young kids, but it turns out that actually that was something that the students did not like, and since these are posted publicly on YouTube, I can tell that other random people from the internet do not like the fact that I have background music on those. So I stopped pretty quickly, but the first few do, and I think I might even redo those lectures to remove the background music. Yeah, so the benefits of having the lectures on YouTube are that you don't have to worry about missing details, right? You can review course material when we get toward the end for the exam. Flexibility, you can watch them whenever you want. Some drawbacks, I said this when this was an in-person class, I was actually planning on doing this anyway. And, people aren't going to attend class as much, and that's okay with me as well. The course content is more or less contained in the lectures. So the class attendance, we can do other things. Or then you have me that you can ask questions about things you don't understand, etc. So ultimately, the question is, should we be using class time, our time together here, different than me lecturing? Okay. So I know that an important student complaint about what teachers have done for online teaching is that they don't want to get additional stuff. I mean, we already have a full course that has, however many ECTS. So, I already have all that content up on YouTube, and the exam is going to be based on those lectures. So, I could add extra stuff, right? I could have you guys all read something, popular from the news, and we could try to talk about how, about how that relates to the models we've been doing in class or whatever. But if I design any sort of extra exercises like that, then that's like increasing the amount of work that you need to do over what I was expecting when the course was a physical class where it was lecture based. So, I don't necessarily think that that is a solution, that I come up with a bunch of extra exercises for us to do in class. At least my feeling is that you're probably not going to want that. So what I would like to do today is maybe break you guys up into groups, and then maybe you can just talk about what you think would be the best way to proceed with this course. So, the default is that I just do lectures as usual, but live. And then you also have the YouTube stuff from last year to look at. Also, one other thing I want to ask you about is whether it's okay with you if I not only record these the lectures as I give them, if we do end up going that direction, but if I also post those on my YouTube account. So yeah, those are some questions to think about. So let's break up into groups for say 10 minutes, and I'll let you guys talk about that. Then we'll come back as a quorum. and we'll talk about it all together, and then we'll take a break. Okay, so we have about 20 minutes until our break. So it'll be 10 minutes in groups, 10 minutes together, and then we'll take a break. So let me try to break you up into groups. Apparently, it's easier if I stop sharing. All right, somebody said 70. See, I can't see the chats, but somebody said 72 students were enrolled. We've got 56 here. Yeah, it's not clear how many people are stuck outside. Let's do breakout rooms. We'll do about 5-6 people per room. Let's do that. Okay. Hey, Giaman. Hey.
Could you sign me to the group again? I jumped off.
Sure. It actually says you're still assigned, but let me put you on a different group. The only problem is that the group that you were assigned to has only 4 people in it. But yeah, I'll try.
Thank you.
Let's see here. Move to. I'll just put you in. Should I kick you out again? I tried to move you back to 6, but that's okay. Okay, just give them 2 seconds so everybody can join up again. So I should have also mentioned before you guys went out that that I've heard that the study boards are going to be very flexible about the amount of sort of time that we spend on Zoom total is another thing. So, you know, we don't have to spend 3 hours if the scheduled lecture is 3 hours. But anyway, okay, so let's hear a little bit. So anybody have some suggestions or thoughts that they'd like to share about how we should run the course?
Yeah, we were all thinking that it would be great if instead of lectures, we could have at least some like exercise classes and Q&A sessions where we can beforehand email you questions and different exercises that we found more challenging. And then just a live session where you go through them and maybe record them as well. So that you can watch it after, like a thorough solution.
Okay, so I mean, so you're going to get some problem sets, right? And then something that's already built into the course is that I would solve those problems. But you're saying that maybe in addition to say, or maybe you're saying that I should solve those problems live and then record that, and then that way you guys can ask questions. Is that what you guys are thinking?
Is every single exercise and problem, every one of those come with a video with a solution? Like
I mean, not necessarily, right? I mean, it depends what we decide. But they could, right? So what I did last year is that I just recorded a video of me going through all of the solutions.
All right.
But then, of course, you know, students couldn't ask questions during those solutions.
Yeah, so maybe if we could have a couple, I'm not suggesting all of them, but a couple of Q&A sessions about different models and solutions and things like that.
But not additional exercises, about the ones that you're assigned already.
No. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and then to do those live, that sounds possible. And then you know, right now the way it's scheduled is that every week we have, I mean, the way it's scheduled, 2 hours of lecture and 1 hour of exercise class. So then that hour is a live hour where we go through the solutions, record it, something like that.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking as well, like general Q&A sessions, also.
Okay.
For broader topics or whatever.
To replace the lectures. So the lectures are online, and then students watch them, and then we have a Q&A session.
Yeah.
Okay.
It can be like regarding certain aspects of the syllabus as well, like certain models that people maybe thought certain details were unclear, and then in the Q&A session you would be able to ask questions for you to elaborate on them, perhaps. Yeah.
Okay, and then that would replace the live lectures.
Yes, that would essentially be what the live lectures would be used for. Yes,
Gotcha.
correct.
Okay. Let me just write that down.
It would be nice if they would start with a summary.
So what does that mean in practice? So I have a set of slides that are about each chapter. I mean, like the first few slides where I say this model is about this thing, you know, like for instance, suppose we're doing endogenous growth and I say, this is a model where we try to understand how economies continue growing without, you know, without the growth petering off. I mean, I guess what I'm saying is I'm not quite sure what the difference between a summary is and then just a live lecture.
Ah, yes, I see. Okay.
It's not a criticism. I just thought I didn't, you know, my live lecture in a sense is a summary of the chapter. But yeah.
Maybe an alternative could be to do some discussion forum where we put like the things that are a bit more complicated, and so without having a a session properly said, we can just ask some questions and then we see the answer.
That's a possibility. So then it would be like a forum online where you can ask a question, then I could answer it in text rather than actually having it in a video format.
Yeah, because we had this format in the previous course in asset pricing, and I don't know, at least for me, it was working quite well. So like you go through the theory and then you say, this topic is not so clear. Maybe you trip a bit on it and you just post your question. Then the answer is public for everybody.
I see. Yeah, that sounds interesting. It's like a wiki, and then can I set that up through Canvas?
Yes, Canvas has this function.
All right. Wiki through Canvas.
I think it's
Can we talk
called
about
the
Canvas?
discussion forum.
Discussion forum. Gotcha.
On Canvas, are you gonna have every day, as in day 1, day 2, and day 3?
I mean, the alternative is to have the. I mean, there's different ways you could
Like a
organize
week.
it. Well,
I don't know.
so we have oh, I see. You want the week number instead of the day number, which number
Yeah.
of lectures it is. Okay.
So I don't have to do some counting to know which day was which class was what time
Yeah.
number.
Okay, fine. Week number instead of day. I mean, right now the syllabus matches up with the lecture 1, lecture 2, but yeah, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. Okay, so let's see. Go
We
ahead.
also thought that, talked about that it works well with these pre-recorded lectures, and then maybe do some exercises in breakout rooms so that we get to work on some stuff with our classmates, and it's also easier to pay attention through an entire Zoom meeting if we have these breakout rooms.
Okay, but let me see if I understand. So, the lectures, I have a pre-recorded version on YouTube already. And then you're suggesting that should we still have live lectures and then have them broken up by breakout rooms? Or are you suggesting that we just have the breakout room exercise sessions?
I'm more thinking exercise sessions, not necessarily 2 times lectures.
Gotcha. Okay. Other thoughts?
Well, I kind of disagree with this idea because like you're spending the time for preparation then in class and people have different speeds and it's only just 1 hour, the exercises anyways. So if you just present how to derive the solutions, we're a bit prepared, can see, and it's recorded, that would be fine and perfect for me.
Okay. So okay. So let's do this step by step. So first of all, do you guys want me to repeat the lectures live? It sounds like the answer is largely no. The only difference is that then you have sort of more chance to ask me questions during the lectures. Otherwise, it's similar. So let's do a little poll. I learned that they have this nice Zoom function. By the way, this is going to take longer than 10 minutes. So actually, okay, we still have 2 minutes until break. Let me do this poll. I'll give you guys a break. Then when we come back, we'll continue with this discussion a bit, because obviously this is an important thing to suss out early. Okay. Uh-oh, it's asking me to sign in. Okay. I'm just writing a question here. Oh no. Okay. It's about 50-50.
Sorry, I just wanna elaborate on the question. Does it mean that you will pre-record and then you're asking us now if we want live lectures as well?
No, the lectures are already pre-recorded. They're on YouTube. I did them last year.
Okay.
It's the same content. So I'm going to do this year's version, a live version. And one of the questions we didn't talk about yet is whether it's okay with you if I record them again, which I would, and post them on YouTube if you let me.
But the content is exactly the same as last.
I mean, let's say 97% the same. It's the same chapters. I mean, I don't know. I might go through and put something different in.
Yeah, thanks.
Sure. Let's see here. 94% voted. I guess the last three just don't have an opinion. Oh, no, 90. No, everybody has. I should have put in a no opinion one, then we could have closed it. But I'm going to end the polling. Oh, there's actually only one person left. All right, go ahead. There's one person left. Go ahead and vote. Okay, thank you. Let's end polling. All right, so we had an exact tie between yes or no. That makes my life very difficult to be the tiebreaker. All right, let's. Oh, I think I can share this with you. But anyway, let's take a break now for 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and keep up this discussion because this is something important that we have to figure out. So we're on break for 10 minutes. I'll put on an online timer. Okay, so we're back. So yeah, let's keep talking a little bit about this. I was just looking at my YouTube channel, and I realized that actually last year, the first few videos I recorded, I was planning on actually recording all the lectures anyway last year, because I thought it was nice that the students would have this backup. They can go back and look to the lectures, and then I only have to do it once, right? Was the idea. But I can see that the first few times I recorded were in my office, and then the later videos were all from my house. But anyway, yeah. So so I guess maybe we should have been a little bit more explicit. I mean, from your point of view as students, you know, I sort of have like maximum 3 hours of 3 quote student hours, you know, that's more like 50 minutes of sort of live time that I can give to various things, right? So typically it would have been 2 hours of live lecture and then 1 hour of exercise class, right? So we can just continue to do that. That's fine with me. Or, you know, we could do something else. So I guess the trade-off is, you know, would you rather than have 2 hours of lecture and 1 hour of exercise class have, you know, 1 hour of exercise class and then, you know, another hour of Q&A where I field student questions or whatever. So, you know, that's, I guess, the relevant trade-off for you. But like I said, it's very hard for me to make an immediate decision because I've got the classes evenly split for yes and no here. So should we keep discussing? You want me to think about it and just I can make a decision myself, something like that?
If I can just jump in.
Sure.
So I mean, at least it's my opinion, but I don't think it makes sense to have the pre-recorded and the live sessions. And I mean, if the live sessions are just gonna go over all the material again, I don't see how it makes sense, to be honest. But perhaps it could be just a Q&A or something like this. I just think that perhaps not everyone might agree with me, but the pre-recorded ones might be good because, I don't know, one day you're not available and then you can just watch it again, or even if you don't understand and you just want to watch it again, I think it works very well. But yeah, just to have the whole lecture again live, I don't think it makes that much sense. And from what I understood from the poll question, it was kind of if we would do that, right? I think it was a bit confusing as well, the poll question, to be honest. Sorry about that.
So yeah, so the question is, you know, I've been teaching this course for maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years. So, you know, I've got a very well-prepared set of slides. So I can very easily go through them and do the lecture. It will be a lecture that's very similar to the lecture from last year, which is already available.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, yeah. I'm just saying that in my opinion, I'm not saying that anyone agrees with me, but as we're having this discussion, I just thought that I would jump in and say that, in my opinion, it wouldn't be very beneficial if we also had the live one. I don't know if it makes sense for us, nor even you, but perhaps if it was a Q&A or something like this. But again, it's only my opinion. I'm not saying it's the correct thing to do nor anything.
I agree with Christiana as well. I think with our group, we also discussed that live lectures wouldn't necessarily be necessary for us. And in other courses, we also have pre-recorded videos and they work very well. In other courses, we also have it that we only have a 1 hour exercise class. And sometimes we don't get through all the exercise material within that class. So what we actually preferred was to spend as long as we need, and quite broadly covering those exercises, because I think those were also in the end be probably the most important for the exam. So if we need longer than 1 hour to cover those, maybe even 2, that would be beneficial, because as long as we understand the exercises really well, that works for us the best. So maybe instead of a 1 hour exercise class, we take all the time we need. That was the suggestion that we had as a group.
So thank you very much. So so I've heard a lot from the people that think that the live lecture is not important but then I noticed on the poll that half of the students actually said they preferred a live lecture. Is there anybody who had that point of view that would like to say something about why?
I mean, I answered yes to it, but because I think, like Christiana said, it was kind of difficult to understand what the question was actually about. But I think it also, like Valentin said, it depends on the magnitude of the exercises. Because if you can go through them, like explain how you would solve them in 1 hour, then I don't think we should spend more than 1 hour on it, right? But if it's enough to cover like 2 or 2.5 hours, then obviously that's the better way of doing it.
Okay. Yeah, and don't add exercises so that it takes 2.5 hours, I guess would be your
No.
preference. Okay. So, last year when I was doing this, when I was making the lectures online, I think that they improved over the course of me recording them, because at first I was doing like really long lectures and I had music in the background. And then I think I found out later that it's better to split each lecture up into little sections and then have a series of videos. So let's provisionally do this. Let's not have the live lectures. And I will try to go through the ones I made, the lectures I made last year, and see if I can't improve them. And then what we'll do is we'll basically have very long, potentially long exercise classes each week, where we discuss exercises, and then maybe if I could think of some other sort of, not something you have to prepare for, but something that might be interesting, some activity that's related to something we're studying, then maybe that would involve like breakout rooms. Then maybe we can do something like that. To give you an example, like we'll do something like that today. I'll show you what I mean by that, and then maybe I can get your opinions. Also, if you want, I can put the wiki then. That's like an additional thing then that would sort of be another way you can get questions answered. The discussion forum.
If I can just jump in once again, sorry to bother again, but it's just when I mentioned the Q&A, I think someone earlier also said that it's just because we had a class last semester where the teacher would always like start the class. It was actually an exercise class, and she would always start saying, okay, like, do you have any questions about the videos? And then she would have kind of like 30 minutes where people would ask, okay, I didn't really understand that part. And then people would like, like say these kind of things, and she would just explain it a little bit more, or perhaps in another way. And then we would go for the exercises. So that's what I meant with the kind of like Q&A thing.
Oh, that sounds great. And then the idea would be, I'd expect you guys to watch the lecture before the date of the class, and then you could ask, yeah, okay.
Precisely.
Oh, that sounds great. And then I can even have the slides, and then we can talk through the slides if there's a slide that you got questions about. Okay, yeah, let's do that. So then let's start that, but just to give me a little bit of a head start. I mean, so we have class again tomorrow, tomorrow morning. And I was gonna do basically a lecture. It's kind of a fun lecture though. It's not like a super heavy math lecture or anything, on the how things are much better than they're better than things are going better than you think. Okay, so with that one, it would be a bit difficult to ask you to watch that beforehand, since it would be another 2 hours after this 3-hour course. So but I guess then again, it doesn't have to be tomorrow. So maybe just for this one time, let me just tomorrow morning, I'll give the lecture as usual. And then starting from next week, I'll tell you exactly what I expect you to watch, and then we'll do this idea with questions about the slides, and then some sort of exercise class. I should mention, by the way, that the exercise classes are a little bit weird until your first homework is handed in, which is toward the end of February. I want to say like the last week in February or something, because then I don't have a natural you know, once I've given you guys a problem set, then I have something natural to go through for the solutions. So it'll be a little bit experimental before then for a couple of exercise courses, but I'll think of something and I'll send it to you, and at least what we're going to talk about, or maybe we'll do something with group work just in class. That's also a possibility. Okay, that sounds like a plan.
One last question.
Yes.
So the lectures with the music in the background, they will be re-recorded?
Yeah, the lectures with music in the background, I'm thinking about, so not only is there music in the background, but also they're very long, because I was just basically recording like a 2-hour lecture. So yeah, maybe I'm going to go through and take a look and see which ones I think need sort of a quality improvement. And then we'll go from there. I think one of them also, my voice was very low, so it was hard to hear. So I'll go through and try to figure out which one is which.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Okay, so let's jump into I have a bunch of chats here. Agreed. 102% of participants voted. Yeah, that's funny. Are the problem sets for this semester the same ones as for the past one? No. So I realize I've got solutions for the problem sets up already on YouTube. Generally, I change the problem sets a little bit every year, but there probably would be some overlap. I'm actually going to see if I can't take those down to start with, and then I'll put up solutions again when the solutions for your problem sets come in. So similar, but not the same. Okay, cool. All right, so I was going to have some slides about thinking like a macroeconomist. Let's see here. It is 1:49. I have you guys until what time? You guys remember what time? What time does class end today?
3:05, I think.
3:05. Okay.
3:10. I see in the
3:10. Okay. So it's almost 2 already. Wow. That's crazy. Is my clock right? Yeah, okay. All right. Well, let me actually just talk about these slides. Actually aren't online yet. But let me actually just talk about some slides then. I should have pulled these up during the break. Oops, no, they're on the wrong screen. It's weird. Why didn't they share on the right screen? Let me just stop my screen share. Over here. All right, do you guys see the slides?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Try one more thing too. That's right. That's why I like them on the other screen. Well, I have like a little tablet here that I can use to write on the slides, but it only works if it's on the other monitor, but I don't think I'll try it on these. Okay, so what I want to talk about with this set of 19 slides, as you see, is what I call thinking like a macroeconomist. So the idea is kind of to split what you think about as microeconomics from macroeconomics, right? So like, what do you think about every day? Every day, what you're thinking about is, I've got a certain amount of money, I can work a little more, make a little more money, you know, I could buy this thing, well, that's kind of expensive. Or you know, if I'm a firm, then I'm thinking, well, you know, how can I make a profit? It's all kind of about money and profits and wages and expenditures and stuff like that. All right, so I call that, for the purposes of these slides, I call that microeconomic thinking. So what I call macro thinking is when you start thinking about resource constraints. Okay, so rather than thinking about expenditures and profits and wages, I mean, of course we're going to think about all those things, but at some like fundamental level, what we're thinking about is what overall is produced and who gets what of what is produced. Okay, so I think of that as macroeconomic thinking. If you like, it's kind of a resource constraint, right? You're thinking not about what one household is going to do or one firm is going to do. You're thinking about if all the households are acting together or all the firms are acting together, then then what happens? What is produced physically? No money. What is and who gets what? Okay. So it starts with money. So money is very confusing. Why can't the government make everyone richer by just raising everybody's wages 10%? Why not? Why can't the government just send every household another, 10,000 kroner? Make them all richer. That's a question for you, by the way. Why can't the government do that? It could do it. I could. Why not? Print a bunch of money and send it to every household.
Because of inflation?
Because of inflation. I agree.
Because the value of everything in the economy doesn't increase by 10,000 kroners per household and making this money worth anything.
That's an interesting way to,
which makes the inflation.
That's an interesting way to put it, that the value of things doesn't increase, but value, of course, not in terms of kroner. Because if the value in terms of kroner doesn't increase and incomes all increase, then...
Devil's advocate, they actually did give money out during Corona.
They did.
So it works for a short, or if you do it once, it might work.
So everybody got richer. I mean, actually, that's a great example. Actually, that's absolutely right. So during the Corona crisis, Denmark and also other countries did actually give some money directly to households, which you can think of as you said, just basically increasing everybody's bank balances. But the question is, did that result in more production? I'm not sure it did, right? I mean, in Corona, it was like a lockdown. So, you give everybody a bunch of money. It's not clear that production increases. So, I mean, if production didn't increase, then, in a sense, we haven't made everyone richer. What we've done is changed the distribution of who gets what. There's actually a class of economics model. So, we're getting to sort of more complicated macroeconomic models in this course. It's kind of like undergraduate macro is like very different, I think, from what you learn in master's macro. In fact, this time when I was teaching undergraduate macro, I felt like I was learning a lot, because even though I've been teaching master's macro for years now, I had never seen those. I did a political science undergraduate degree, so I never actually I never took an undergraduate macro. And I felt like I could sort of understand a little bit of what like people, talking heads on the media say, because they have these like sort of undergraduate macro models in the back of their heads. And so what we're doing now is going to be very different. And in fact, I hope that I have a chance to talk about that a little later. But it's hard in a sort of carefully written out master style macro model to get money to matter. It will matter. We'll show you how it works. I mean, we're going to go through models where money matters, but it's a little bit hard to get money to matter, because at the end of the day, what a household cares about is consumption, not money, in our models. So in order to get money to matter in a certain class of macroeconomic models, they actually will put money into the utility function. They're called money in the utility function models. And then that way, if, you know, people actually get welfare, they really like having money, different than the way they like having consumption. And in that world, the government actually can make everybody better off by just printing money because it enters into the utility function directly. But I think that those are all really good points. And I wanted to come back to that idea about the Corona stimulus. It's on one of these slides, actually. Yeah, so I said this, ultimately, consumption or welfare or something else is what matters, not money. You know, ultimately, we want money because we want to have something else, whatever that is. Money's confusing. I think that one thing I want to get through in these slides is that when you start thinking about sort of economics with all these like financial assets and money, you become very confused. I become very confused. So often it's good to kind of take a step back and think about production and distribution. So you've all seen this in one of your undergrad courses probably, but you know, money is a medium of exchange. You can pay for goods with it, right? It's a store of value. It's an asset. Money is an asset like a financial asset. It is a financial asset, really. So it takes value from today and brings it to tomorrow. So I'm an apple grower. I grow a bunch of apples today. If I don't eat them, they rot. But you know, I've got more apples than I want to eat. So what I'll do is I'll sell them for money, and then I take that money to tomorrow or you know whatever next month, and then I could use that money to buy things. So it's a way for me of taking value from today and moving it to tomorrow. Okay, so money is an asset. And then also money is a unit of account. You know, we measure the value of different things with money. You know, how much is this coat worth? Well, it's worth about, you know, 100 apples, right? You know, it's like we use money to make those determinations. So because we use money for all these different things, it becomes very complicated to talk about money. To give you an example, so what's the micro perspective on something like savings or investment? Okay, so I'm going to invest my money into an asset. I'm going to compare the rate of return versus the rate of inflation. I'm going to compare the risk versus the reward. You guys just got out of an asset pricing course. So you're going to figure out what discounted value of all of the dividends from this stock are going to be. That's going to be your, you know, your measure of what this buying the stock is worth today. You know, you're ultimately going to choose the asset that's going to have the highest value. This is sometimes called financial investment, and it's very complicated, right? There's all sorts of different assets with different characteristics. And as you saw in your asset pricing course, it can be, you can have a whole career trying to figure out what the correct way to price an asset is. Like for instance, you should have bought GameStop stock 3 weeks ago and sold it 2 weeks ago because that company is fundamentally sound. Anyway, okay, but then what's the macro perspective on savings? Well, some goods are produced and consumed today. The word consumption means used up, right? To consume means to make it so it's no more. Something is gone. To be consumed is to disappear. Investment is something that you produce that's going to increase our production in the future. Okay, for example, you going to Copenhagen Business School is an investment in this macroeconomic sense. Okay, you're foregoing consumption today. You could have used your time to consume more today, but instead you're sort of building up your production in the future. Okay, so you know, a machine, right? So you know, we could either make you know, go back to Robinson Crusoe, right? So Robinson Crusoe, one person on an island all by himself. He can, you know, fish every day with his stick and stab fish, or he can spend a little bit of time not fishing but making a net. And then that day when he's making the net, he doesn't eat as many fish, but in the future he's going to eat more fish, right? So that net is an investment, is the idea. So sometimes that sort of investment is called fixed capital investment to differentiate it from financial investment. And yeah, I think about that as kind of the macroeconomics way of looking at savings and investment. It doesn't have anything to do with money, for example. or interest rates. Okay, production. At its most basic level, what do we mean by production? Okay, so it's taking something in the world and somehow changing it. And you change it to something that you value more. Okay, so that could be extracting resources, wind power, or fish in the sea. Robinson Crusoe is stabbing those fish. They're in the sea. So he's changing it so that they're in his hands. If you add labor to some things, you've got a bicycle plus bicycle repair, that makes for a better bicycle, or combining things. So you combine different components and you get something that's worth more. Okay, so there's no money directly involved in production, and there's no financial assets that are directly involved. It's another worldview. It's another worldview. And I think when you think about it this way, you could imagine like a society that's being planned from the top. And if I look at like, say, a snowy day in Copenhagen, and there's all these people on their bikes and they're all going off somewhere, in a weird way, they're rushing off to do something for me, right? I mean, maybe somebody works in the administration that's providing electricity to my home, or maybe somebody is going to be manning a shop that's selling coffee, that it's there for me to go get a coffee if I want a coffee. I mean, these people are all like busting their butts to do something for me. That's kind of cool, right? And then I'm also rushing to do something for them, right? So I'm, whatever, repairing a course, or I'm teaching a course, or maybe I'm doing some research. So, so the idea would be that we have this society where we're all sort of doing all kinds of things for each other. I mean, everybody is sort of working for the common good. Yeah, so that's an old Adam Smith point, because Adam Smith then goes a step farther and says that it's not because the butcher loves me that he gives me meat, and it's not because the tailor loves me that she gives me clothing. They do it out of their own self-interest. But that way to look at it is sort of, it sounds kind of negative, because you're saying, well, people are all selfish, and we're taking advantage of the selfishness. But from another point of view, everybody is busting their butt to provide goods and services for everybody else. It's almost as though there's a very altruistic part of way to look at that, I think. Okay, so anyway, that's my pitch for this macroeconomic way of looking at the world. But who cares, right? I mean, I would guess that most of you probably will not go into a career as macroeconomist. Maybe some of you will. You'll be making decisions for your household. You'll be working at a firm. All of those decisions are microeconomic. How do you maximize your profit if you're a firm? Household economy. How do we think about intake and leisure, and what we should buy? Should we move to a nicer house or whatever? Those are all decisions you can think of through the lens of money, right? And you don't have to think about these resource constraints. But why should you care anyway? Well, because when you're doing policy, then these kind of resource constraints really end up mattering a lot. Okay, and why is that? It's because policy affects the entire economy. Okay, so what would be an example? An excise tax. So if you raise the tax on a particular good, so suppose airline flights, or if you have a wage subsidy for certain types of workers. You saw recently that maybe there was a additional, in Denmark, there's an additional tax deduction you can take now if you are doing construction, I believe, which was somewhat controversial in the last few months. So, those sort of things, they have these macroeconomic effects because they're affecting everyone at once, not just one household or one firm, but they're affecting like a whole industry or the whole economy. And I think a lot of confusion is due to microeconomic thinking. And right now, this is probably somewhat abstract, but let me give you a couple of examples. Okay, so let's discuss a couple of couple of things from the perspective of this macroeconomics rather than microeconomics. Okay. So a trade deficit. So I assume that you guys have studied the idea of a trade surplus or a trade deficit. So a trade deficit is when you're importing more goods and services in terms of value than you're exporting. Okay. So, I mean, what does that mean from a macroeconomic perspective? It means that sort of the value of what we are using, if we have a trade deficit, which is true in the United States, Denmark actually has a small trade surplus. If you have a trade surplus, let's stick with Denmark. Well, I say trade deficit here, so let's stick with the United States. If we have a trade deficit, what that means is that it's like what we are using in our own country, like the goods and services that we're using for consumption and investment, the value of those goods and services is actually higher than the value of what we're sending to other countries. So there's this old question that I will probably pose a few times in this course, but which is better, exporting or importing? And I've already, unfortunately, given you a shade of the answer there, or one possible answer. But, you know, for many years, 18th century and before, people all thought that exporting was better than importing. And why is that? It's because when you export, you're getting money, right? When you're importing, you're losing money, right? I mean, you're paying people abroad when you're importing, and your people abroad are paying you when you're exporting. So isn't it better to export? So, I mean, you can probably already see where I'm going. I've sort of shaded into it here, but you know, that point of view doesn't really make sense, because what do you want? What are you going to do with the money, right? So people wanted to, like in this mercantilism, they wanted to accumulate gold and silver in their country, but it doesn't really make sense, because gold and silver by themselves are useless from a macroeconomic perspective. So in some senses, it's better to have more imports than exports, because you're getting more goods and services than you're sending abroad. Of course, it's somewhat more complicated than that, because the people abroad that are sending more to you than you're sending back, they're also getting more claims on your future production. But let's not go into too much detail there. But anyway, at the end of the day, what is a trade deficit? It means that we're getting more stuff in our country than we're sending abroad. All right. Second one I have here is COVID, wage compensation of service workers. I find this one really interesting. We actually already touched on it a bit. So, you know, this isn't really a traditional economic stimulus in sort of the macro 101 sense. And the reason why is because the economy is in a lockdown. So we're not really expecting the wage compensation to restart the economy, because because of sort of regulation, well-meaning regulation, but it's probably, it's probably debatable, but good regulation. The economy is shut down. So this isn't really a traditional stimulus payment. So we're not really changing production, all right? And if you don't change production of goods and services, then all that this wage compensation can do is it can change the distribution of goods and services. We haven't changed production, so we can only change the distribution. So I think the right way to look at that is you're imagining a world without wage compensation. Then, these workers would have been poorer. Now we have a world with wage compensation. We're taking production from people that aren't getting wage compensation and giving it to the people that do have wage compensation. Okay. We haven't changed production, so the only thing it can change is distribution. Waiting for somebody to challenge me, but nobody's going to challenge me? Okay, you don't have to. So, and then, moving on, sort of similar flavor of the next one. So taxing the rich to give to the poor. That may have some effect on production. There's kind of these famous Laffer curve type arguments about how taxes affect production. It kind of depends on the tax, but I guess what I'm trying to say here is that let's think rather than about the effect on production, let's think about the effect on distribution. So when you tax the rich and give to the poor, what you're doing is you're taking consumption out of the hands of the rich and you're putting it into the hands of the poor. So it's like taking a hamburger out of the hands of the rich and, you know, giving that consumption to the poor, right? So I mean, it's like transfer of actual goods and services. That one, increase in the savings rate. So what does it mean from a macroeconomic sense if people start saving more? Well, it means that they're consuming less, which means that they're investing more in a macroeconomic sense. So it means that of everything that's produced this year, we're going to produce less that's for consumption and more that's for increasing our productivity in the future. And then the very last one I have here is better inventory management technology. I think I talk about that probably too much, but the idea is that, you know, if things are very well organized and we have some very good way of finding inventories, then that's kind of like a free lunch, because that's going to increase our production, right? That's going to make, with the same amount of resources, same amount of labor and capital, because we've now got better inventory management, we can actually get more outputs. So that's sort of an increase in the size of the pie, if you like. Okay. All right, so then now I have a few different policy proposals, which actually are from last year. From this year, all the parties want to talk about is Corona. But they're from a few different Danish political parties. The goal isn't to think about whether these are good or bad policies, but it's to think about it's how to think about these policies in terms of macroeconomics. Okay, so I'm just going to flip through them here and show you. So the 30-hour work week, I've got it in Danish and translated into English by yours truly. Not that my Danish is very good. So I've got these 4 things. And then that's either here or there. So what I was thinking I would do is, let's see here. I think we had our last break at right about now, about an hour ago. I'll give you guys a 10-minute break and then we'll come back and I'm going to split you up into groups and I'll have you guys take a look at these 4 different proposals and then try and figure out how to think about them in a macroeconomic sense. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break. Okay, so as I mentioned, let's take a look at these questions. So again, these are just kind of 4 different policy proposals. And what I want you to do is try to think about how we would think about them when we think about like the resources of the whole economy. So this first one, actually, this 30-hour work week is probably the most direct one, but I'm going to break you up into groups. We'll take about maybe 10, 15 minutes to discuss them. Maybe let's say 15 minutes, and I'll kind of stop by in the groups and see how you're doing. And then we'll come back together and talk about them as a class. So let me quick do this. Oh, I got a couple of chats. 1510 inflation. Yes. Yeah, when you're sharing the video, it's very hard to do chats. It's an unfortunate part of Zoom. Okay, options. Let's do 15 minutes.
Are proposing that that they can decide if real wage is going to be converted into income or reduced work time, because inflation is like probably gonna ramp up if this will be a thing, if this will be implemented. But
I'm here, by the way. That sounds good.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
I'll let you discuss. I don't want to make everybody. That was my bad. I must have clicked on the close button. I'll put you guys back in a second. Sorry about that. It'll be the same groups. But now I have to wait for 24 seconds until it opens.
Are you from the States?
Yes.
Okay. Because you translated stop and frisk in one of them.
Oh, did I?
Which I think nobody that's not from the States knows what that is.
Well, apparently you know. All right, here goes.
Nice. Okay.
Everyone. So how's it going?
We were just starting the first one. And
Yeah, I know you had no time at all. But okay, cool. I'll leave you to it. Let's try and do this without closing all the groups. Leave breakout room. Yes.
Can one of you guys put up the share his or her screen?
Yeah, give me a second.
You guys just starting?
Yes,
Yeah.
we're reading the
Yes.
statements.
Okay, cool. I'll leave you to it.
Oh, Jenkins is here.
Here I am.
Can you explain what they are trying to do? Like, we're not quite sure we understand. So they want to convert it to 30 hours work week, but does it just mean that you can like work 40 hours anyway, or does it mean?
It looks to me like what they want to do is reduce the work week from what it is now to 30 hours. It's like 37 and a half to 30 hours. And then give employees the opportunity, the option to either continue working, but then work more, but then get your pay increased, or keep the same pay and go down to 30 hours.
Yeah.
That's how I read it, at least.
Okay, so it looks like nothing would change then.
Well, people's pay would go up, I guess.
Yeah, but then
Yeah,
inflation goes up also.
Yeah, but so the other prices will also go up. Okay, so that's like how we should think about it. Okay.
That's how you think about it, but be careful not to only think about it in terms of money, because presumably not only workers, some workers will choose to actually reduce their work week, right? So think about it in terms of production.
Yeah, makes sense.
Anyway.
If production goes down, then GDP goes down also.
GDP goes down, I agree. So yeah, I mean, it depends, right? So I mean, I think that there's an argument. Some people might say that people are more productive if they work less hours. So you can have a discussion about that, but
it depends on the job, I guess.
Trade-off?
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, what was that, Kira?
Is it like a trade-off?
Is it a trade-off? It might be, right?
It's
so I mean,
not...
I think that some people argue that when you reduce people's work week, then they become so much more productive that actually they can produce more than they would had they been working more hours. So if that is true, then there's no trade-off, right?
My theory is that is true for the first month, then it goes back to normal.
Yeah, could be. Anyway, yeah, it sounds like a good discussion, so I'll leave it there.
Told me, but hey, you guys say you want to lower the pension age. I don't know. I mean,
hey, I'm here, by the way. How's it going, guys? Any questions?
We were kind of a bit confused about the 30-hour work week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it about what the policy is, or what sort of how you think about it in this sort of macroeconomic sense?
No, like how can you protect their purchasing power? Basically, I mean, workers are paid hourly, right? Well, at least in the US.
We're gonna raise their wages, though. We're gonna raise their wages so that they make the same in 30 hours as they would have made in 37.5 hours, which is the current Danish work week.
Or you can reduce so you have more spare time, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So we're going to reduce the work week from 37 and a half to 30 hours, but we're going to keep the weekly pay the same. But you also have the option of continuing to work 37 and a half hours, but then we're going to increase your weekly pay.
Okay. Yeah.
So the question is, how do you think about that as a macroeconomist? Like, what happens to production and distribution? Those are the two questions.
I mean, they probably produce less because there are less working hours.
Sounds
I
like
mean, I mean, you get paid more, but it doesn't make you like work harder or something. So.
Right. I mean, that's a plausible point of view. So you say that if everyone were to work less, then they would likely produce less. And if they produce less, then purchasing power can't possibly remain the same.
Yeah.
Because there's less goods and services produced.
Yeah, and let's say if I were the business owner, I would like well, I would be rather picky on, you know, hiring people.
And also the employees have to work harder within those hours, I guess, in order to increase the what was it?
So you're saying that they'd have to work harder? Yes. I mean, another point of view that some people have argued is that workers become so much more productive per hour because they're less stressed or tired or something, that they actually produce more in 30 hours, a 30-hour work week than they would in a 37.5-hour work week. I've also heard that point of view.
Yeah,
well, that's very socialist point of view.
Is that right? Okay. But anyway, yeah. So, but anyway, that's kind of how that's kind of how I want you to think about it, right? So you see, it's about production.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe distribution. But okay, I'll leave you guys to it.
All right.
It's not great.
How's it going, guys? Any questions? Is it okay?
Just a question. Are we just supposed to discuss the first one or also the lowering pension age?
Also the lowering pension age. There's actually 4 of them, but if you don't get to all of them, it's no big deal.
Okay.
What did you guys say about the first one, out of curiosity?
I said that it's a very good idea to do that because either way, it's going to increase people's productivity. So people who care about having more leisure time will be more productive when having only 30 hours, whereas people who like to work hard and spend time working will be incentivized with more money.
I agree. What's going to happen to, so remember the 2 macroeconomics questions, what happens to production and distribution? So does production in the economy overall go up or down?
I would say up.
And why is that?
Again, because depending on the type of person that you are, either incentive would be more appealing to you. So either more money or less working. And I mean, people who like to work less, even if you fit them into a 40-hour work week, it's not like they're going to be more productive if they just have 30. I mean, it's the same work, right? If it decreases by...
I guess it depends on what sort of job you're thinking about. So, I mean, suppose my wife works in a restaurant, for instance, she's a manager. But, you know, if wait staff work 30 hours, then, you know, in a sense, they're doing less because they're not providing waiter services for those last 10 hours.
True.
But I mean, maybe jobs like my job, maybe I can do it in less hours per week. I don't know. But I mean, you know, I think that there are some types of jobs where, you know, the butt has to be in the seat or the feet have to be on the ground, you know, maybe construction or different things like that, different types of services like that.
True. Yeah.
But yeah, I was just trying to feed another point of view there. I think the point of view that you said, which is that even though people will be working less hours, they will be so much more productive that they will, in those hours, they will actually produce as much or even more than they would have produced in 40 hours. That's also another plausible point of view, I guess. It's what people argue, I think, often. I just heard my doorbell ring.
Yeah, wasn't there a country who tried to do 4-day work weeks?
I think they had an experiment in Sweden.
Yeah,
They've had a couple. I'll be right back. Hold on.
Well done.
Sorry, my doorbell rang, and if you don't answer when then they don't deliver your package. So,
we all know the struggle.
Yes, exactly. So okay, sounds good. I'll Okay, just give you 1 second. Everybody's back here. All right, so so I had a couple. Some people. I'm sure that very few groups got through all 4 of them, but actually this first one I think is the one that's the most fun to talk about in this perspective. And I heard a bunch of. I was kind of visiting different breakout rooms, and I heard a bunch of different perspectives and some good. I think there's some nice discussion. So let's ask this question. So, what is it in terms of production and distribution? How can we understand this policy in terms of macroeconomics? Anybody want to chime in? Oh, maybe I should just give a short introduction. So this says that we're going to reduce the work week from 37.5 hours, that's what it is currently in Denmark, to 30 hours. Okay, so it's about 25%, a little more. We're going to pay people the same if they choose to take 30 hours, but we'll also allow them an option to continue to work 37.5 hours, but then we're going to give them a corresponding wage increase. Okay. So what happens if this policy is implemented to production and distribution?
So I don't know if we're just supposed to chime in.
Yeah, please.
So we talked about that you have to have some assumptions in terms of what you believe the current work capacity compared to the work week is. So depending on whether or not you think 37.5 hours is like the quote unquote efficient level of work, because we probably assume that there's some sweet spot of working hours that would optimize your working capacity. If you work every hour of the day, you're probably going to be less efficient than if you work only 2 hours, like per hour of work.
So I think that sounds very reasonable. Per hour of work, the less hours you work, the more productive you are.
Yeah, and then then you have to make the calculus. But apart from that, when you lower the work week, there's also a substitution effect that if you aren't that much more productive, then you also get more people employed, because presumably you still have to produce X amount of things. But that would also require that we also lower the incomes, which I don't think the policy is hinting at. It says like stay the same, I think, but just fewer hours. Or did I misread that?
No, that's right. So what you're saying then is that if people became so much more productive that when we dropped hours from 37.5 to 30, they actually produced more than they would have produced in 37.5. Then go ahead.
Yeah, that's one possibility. But the most reasonable thing, given a absolute drop, would probably be that there's like less production. But then it's also, do we care about the production versus the spare time? Because 7.5 hours more per day, that's like a full day of work that you get off. Like the fact that you don't have to work might have other benefits. So
Absolutely.
I think we talked about like innovation, because you have more spare time to think about other things. So things that cannot be captured concretely. And then just the joy of having a longer weekend, I guess.
Sure. So, I mean, the second one speaks a bit to whether it's a good idea or not. But I think that you're absolutely right to be thinking about whether this idea that we can pay everyone the same and have a reduced work week is possible or not. And I think you're right that it depends on assumptions about productivity. Anybody else want to add anything to that? I have something to add, but I'd rather hear what you guys have to say first.
Well, they are also talking about that they want to do this slowly over the next 10 years. And so to keep consumption levels shouldn't be so hard, since we have technology improvements, etc., which will make us more productive over the next 10 years anyways. It's more like if we compare to maybe a country who doesn't do it, that their increase might be more if the assumptions which we talked about before do not hold.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that is what they do. So they say, we assume if you go, there's more than just this little paragraph, but they say, we're going to assume that the economy, GDP is increasing by 2% every year or whatever. So we're going to do this slowly, so you never have an actual decline. You just have the absence of growth. Although, I'm not sure, a decline versus an absence of growth, I don't know, whatever. You could imagine it's a weird thing because if you stop now, I mean, I compare standards of living 20 years ago versus 20 years in the future and so on. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so the thing that I wanted to add is that I mentioned this to one of the groups. You know, one thing is that some jobs, there's a clear, like, you know, some jobs like service jobs, like say construction, or these are the examples I used in this group, so you guys are hearing it again, construction, or like say working in a restaurant. There, if you reduce your hours, it's unlikely that your productivity gains are going to compensate, because if you're, you know, wait staff in a restaurant, then you have to be there in order to serve the customer. You can't serve future customers, you know, because I'm very productive right now. And construction is you know, there's a similar thing. Of course, you know, you could imagine that construction workers might be more productive if they had shorter work days per hour, but at some point, you know, you just have to think that you need them to be there doing their thing, or painting or something like that, typically more manual jobs. But anyway, yeah, so those all sound good, and that's good discussion. Great. The next one, did anybody get to lowering pension age? Anybody get to talk about that one? What does that mean in terms of production and distribution?
So we talked about some parts where it's pretty similar to the 30-hour work week, in that you get an absolute decrease in amount of labor hours per person over the entire lifespan. But then there's, I read something about this idea of synergies between older and younger workers. So whether or not there is a complementary or substitutional relationship between them. So that is, when you are in certain workloads, having an older worker can assist younger workers, making them more productive by virtue of being there. And in other cases, they can just crowd out younger workers. So depending on the specific industry and what theoretical assumptions you have, then this can both increase productivity in terms of allowing younger people to get into the workforce that would otherwise be unable to do that, or decrease it because you are now you know, lowering that complementary effect of having synergies between younger and older workers.
So the idea would be something like, very interesting. So the idea is that if they're complements, then this is definitely going to reduce production, because we're reducing the number of hours worked, and also we're reducing the good that's or whatever, the factor that's complementary. So we have sort of a double whammy of two bad effects. But the other side, where the substitutes, you're saying that maybe even though there's much less work, much less hours worked, the composition of the workforce is going to be such that there's productivity gains. It's like the old guy that's like sitting, you know, the old professor that's sitting in our department that you know, is taking up an office space but doesn't go to any seminars, and you know, just like, and doesn't care about his teaching. You know, if that guy leaves, then you know, then that actually makes me more productive. I get a nicer office, I get to teach his classes, and the students like it better or something. Is that the idea?
Yeah, exactly. So it is that there's always this share of the workforce that's unemployed in most economic models. So whether or not you can shift that from being what would otherwise be evenly distributed amongst the age groups, or concentrate that on like the older people who would otherwise still go out of the workforce. So that would also tie into like, what are the unemployment benefits? Because if it's like significantly higher to be retired than just being out of or unemployed, then that would also play into the like cost benefit analysis. But if they're crowding each other out, then maybe, yeah, just getting the old people to retire earlier when they want to retire anyways could be more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so you're saying that they're not productive, or that there's young people that are just not working, and if the old people left, those jobs would open and the young people would go into them. There's like a fixed number of jobs.
Yeah, I think that to some extent that could be the case. But there will be like an absolute decrease in amount of workers. But then there's also a consideration of like, if people, presumably, at least the Danish version of this is that you are given the option of retiring. So otherwise you wouldn't have it. So people who still want to work will still be able to. They just get the alternative to retire. So maybe the people who are taking that option to leave were in the first place also less productive because they didn't really want to be there.
Yeah, they're less productive. And then the other part that's important is that somehow the other people in the economy get more productive, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's possible. But again, you know, you have to have this effect of total reduction in hours, and then that's outweighed by this other effect.
Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I've never heard anybody use that, have that point before. You know, it's always dangerous to think about the economy like jobs as like a fixed number of jobs, and then either you get it or I get it. But I guess it's not, you don't need that. You don't need to say that the old people are sort of taking up a job, and then when they, you know, leave, then somebody can go into that slot. You don't need that for that argument. But yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, but I mean, I guess kind of the overall point is that here we have a lot less people working. So, you know, unless we have some sort of productivity effect that's going to offset, then you're going to get less production, whatever you do. Anybody else want to add anything to that one? Any other thoughts?
We looked at the paper in our bachelor's, and it's interesting both for this policy proposal as well as the one before. Work and leisure I opened it now, obviously. In the US and Europe, why so different? And they say, like, before the quantitative analysis, they look at the cultural component of this question and say that there's a social multiplier effect. So if it works both for working less hours per week or retiring early. If all of your friends are retiring early, you will want to retire early as well. And if all your friends will be working, you will see that although the formal retirement age is lowered, people won't step out of the workforce because they have nothing to do in their spare time. And rather,
that's a really interesting point. And I looked up the paper too, and it's by Alberto Alesina, who visited our department. Actually, it's by a couple of guys.
Alesina, Galiza, and Sakadod.
Yeah, exactly. But this Alberto Alesina, he visited our department, and he actually worked with somebody in our department. He unfortunately died last year. Suddenly, it was like a heart attack. But yeah, it's very interesting. Do you know this this literature on the rat race? Something we potentially could talk about at some point. But the idea is that, not exactly what you said, but it's related. So the idea would be that we would all be better off if we all worked much less. But the thing is, you know, we're all vying for that promotion. I'm assistant professor. I really want to be an associate professor. And to do that, I have to outshine my colleagues. So I have the incentive to work a little bit harder, right? To, try to publish a few more papers or something. And then my colleagues also want that promotion, right? So they're also going to work harder. And then we get into this spiral of everybody working harder. And then eventually we're all working the same amount. We're working now at the point where we're all even, but now we're all working at like a much, much higher number of hours. So we would all be better off if we could just all coordinate and just pull back the number of hours we work. It's sort of a Nash prisoner's dilemma type of thing. So yeah, it's called the rat race. So it's got a bit of that feeling. Cool, interesting. Any other thoughts?
Hey, David.
Mm-hmm.
We just have a question, a quick question, how is pension fund or say Social Security sustainable in that situation? Because people live longer and longer, but the Social Security is not like that. It's kind of like a Ponzi scheme, but if you lower the retirement age, that will absolutely shorten the life of Social Security. So
yeah, exactly. So that's a very good point, Chandra. So So kind of the thrust of the question is exactly that question. So I mean, you know, we can get confused by thinking about how Social Security is funded, or you know, whether it's a Ponzi scheme or pay as you go, or is it whatever. You know, this is all, it can get very confusing. But the idea was kind of that if we reduce the retirement age, absent the sort of tricky effects that was it Kai was talking about, absent those, then that's going to reduce the amount that's produced in the economy. Okay, so whatever else happens, somehow, you know, someone has to be consuming less in that situation if production is reduced.
Absolutely.
So, you know, that's exactly that point you're saying. How can we maintain the same level? We can't, right?
Yeah.
Absent these tricky effects that could actually make people more productive. Okay, so we have just a few minutes left. Let me just remark, I don't know if anybody got this far, but with criminal justice reform, anybody want to say anything about that one? How's that? How do we think about that from a macroeconomic point of view?
So we got to that one eventually, and we thought it was kind of a trade-off, because on the one hand, if you would give a higher penalty for crimes, probably there's going to be less people committing these crimes, and it's going to be an increase in productivity or production or any of those levels. On the one hand, if the penalty is bigger, then the rehabilitation for people that commit crimes will also be harder. So they will have a less chance of finding a job later, and this will then probably lead to a decrease in production or productivity or any of those levels. So it was kind of a trade-off, we thought, between what is the between like the increase in penalty, is it going to lead to a decrease in crime, or is the rehabilitation going to be lower? And we thought that will probably depend on what the current rehabilitation is. So currently are a lot of people that have committed crimes getting into crime later, or are they rehabilitating more? So you would have to analyze that too.
Very interesting. So so the idea is that when we have, say, a stronger or a more safe sort of society, then that makes people more productive throughout the society. Is that right? Is that how I understand? That's one of the sides of your trade-off?
Yes, and in general, people then don't reason into committing crimes, since the penalty for them is higher, so they will probably still work. So it will also lead to a higher production, higher welfare, etc.
Right. So why is it that when the society is safer, it's more like our society is more productive? Exactly. So I mean, is it because, say, I don't have to spend so much time or spend so much money on security in my firm, you know, because I don't have to pay for all kinds of video surveillance and metal, everything. You know, I look around Copenhagen and I look at apartment buildings, they just have glass windows on the bottom floor. Whereas, like, you know, in other places I've been, they have metal things to stop people from breaking in. This sort of thing, is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, and I thought our way of looking at it was also more direct. So if the penalty for committing a crime is lower, then fewer people or more people will probably commit a crime. So you have less people in the workforce in that sense. So that direct effect. Of course, your way of reasoning could be also both ways, because if you have more security, then it would also lead to more work that needs to be put in security. So these firms will probably have more stuff to do, which leads to more production. So there's arguments for any side, whether like a safer society can increase production. But in general, as you said, if you have like less stuff to worry about in terms of having to do your work, that could be more efficient, and that could lead to a better outcome.
So I didn't actually say much about this. Those are all very good points. But there's an idea of rent seeking. And rent seeking is the idea that you're spending resources on doing something that doesn't increase sort of production that can be consumed, but rather on doing things that just change who gets what so an example would be if if I have glass windows in my low floor apartment building, somebody might come in and steal my stuff, but then, they're still consuming it. It's like, it's changed the distribution. So now when I put up my metal things, it's changing the distribution, but more stuff, there's not more stuff in the economy. It's just a different person that's consuming the stuff. It's me instead of the burglar. So, so one way to look at this, more police, is that we're spending more resources in society, at least at the public level, on creating, on making sure that the distribution is the way we like it, not from everyday people to criminals, but it's just, stays with the everyday people who say earned the, or who produce the stuff. So from one point of view, you could look at additional police on the streets as something that is not increasing production that will be consumed. You see what I'm saying? It's like, it's diverting these people that would have otherwise been, say, working in a cafe into police work. So they're now doing something that's not consumable, but something that's rent seeking. So any other comments about that one?
Well, the argument also applies in the same way to like the theft who's breaking in. He's also not producing anything. He's also just changing the distribution of the goods.
Absolutely, I agree.
So it depends, like if it's like one police officer per one person who goes into the workforce and doesn't steal, it could be even level out.
Sure. So I mean, both are rent seeking. Both the thief and the policeman are both rent seeking.
I also just say that, I mean, in many places it was proven that increasing police doesn't necessarily decrease crime in the long term. I mean, it kind of just puts more distrust between the public and the police. It would be more maybe efficient to increase production to better the education. I mean, they're saying to put more pressure on gang areas. Why not focus more on re-educating those areas than just increasing the police force? Because they're not going to stop the crime. It's just going to be more distrust and fights.
That sounds like a plausible point of view. I think that's a controversial point in both directions. One that I am in no way an expert in or have anything really to say about. I know that like, I've heard this point that you're making, Kelly, and then also I know that like Rudy Giuliani, before he became a crazy person, was the mayor of New York in the early 1990s, and people gave him credit for sort of bringing down crime by increasing the police force. But I know that it's a controversial subject. So okay. I think we have, let's see here, like somebody said the class ends at 3:15, 3:10, whatever, something like that. Let me just take this for myself. So there's a tax reform. So they want workers to be taxed less and capital to be taxed more. Let me actually skip it because I have something about it on, I believe, the next slide. Yeah. So there's this interesting thing about, ever wonder why income taxes are the highest taxes? It seems kind of crazy, doesn't it? VAT 25% in Denmark, which is already the highest in the world. We have a capital gains tax in Denmark. I don't know what it is right now. I actually have no idea. So I'm going to say something and it's going to be totally wrong. So I'm not going to say anything, but much lower than the income taxes for sure. We have the corporate, I want to say corporate profit or something like that tax, which is like 20%. So isn't it weird that like the highest tax is the one that we charge to workers? Like not the capital owners? That seems so backwards, doesn't it? But there's a reason for it. And the reason is that for some reason, people tend to work full time, regardless of what the taxes are. I mean, it's only true up to a point. I mean, there is some difference. If you raise taxes, people work less. But if the work week is 37.5 hours, it doesn't really matter that much what the tax level is. People tend to work 37.5 hours. So the reason why, historically, why income taxes are the highest is because that's where you can raise the most revenue. If you raise the taxes, you don't get less work. You know, it's not, quote, distortionary in the sense that people won't do the thing that you tax. So, you know, it is what it is. And one thing is that if we were to reduce income taxes and then raise capital gains taxes, then you might be worried that it would have sort of there would be like less investment because people do tend to save less when the capital gains taxes are higher, related to the last one. But anyway, just a kind of neither here nor there point. And then one last thing, to the last slide, you can see 19 out of 19. It's fun to think about banking and finance from a macroeconomic perspective, because these are industries that are all about financial assets. Totally confusing. Trades are going on all the time. Stocks are gaining, losing value, as you guys learned in your semester or whatever your course about asset pricing, which is, I remember it being very complicated when I studied it in my master's degree. Actually, I never had a PhD course on it. But anyway, what ultimately is the banking and finance sector doing? It's connecting someone who doesn't want to consume all of their production today and somebody who wants to have sort of extra either machinery or consumption today. So you have like two people, right? There's one person who's got a ton of apples and another person who today doesn't have any apples, but tomorrow he's going to have a bunch. Both of us are better off if I can give him some apples today and then he gives me some apples tomorrow. So the finance industry at its base fundamental, value for society is connecting those people, the ones that need more today and will have more tomorrow, with those that have more today and will need more tomorrow. So that's what, when we say about financial services, that's the service that they're supposed to be doing, okay, from the macroeconomic point of view. Okay, so I think I'll leave it there. Like I said, tomorrow morning, I'm going to give my lecture on Things Are Better Than You Think. It's going to be a lecture, okay? So, I'm going to give it anyway. So that's tomorrow morning. And as we discussed, I'll write an announcement on Canvas about how we're going to structure the course. So thank you for that. That was a very useful discussion. So, okay, so I'll see you tomorrow morning. And thanks for a nice day today.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
David, can I ask you a question before that?
Sure.
So you mentioned something about the purpose of taxation in terms of a distributional manner. And the models that I could see were covered in this course, or do they in any capacity talk about the distributional aspect of that? Like the impact of giving money to different actors within the economy, or is there any, because it seems like most of the models are talking about like a representative consumer or
absolutely.
like
I don't think there's anything really about taxes in the course at all. The only thing that's related is that they introduce government, but the only thing government does in this course is going to be taking production and like taking capital and throwing it into the ocean. So
okay.
Like,
well, that's
so,
great.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I'll point it out when we get there. But there's basically nothing about the government here except for a bit about monetary policy, I would say. But there's nothing about redistribution or taxation. That's a sort of a different field, right? That's public economics. Definitely. Okay. I'm actually teaching a course this semester in public economics, so I'll be thinking about it, but not in this course.
Thank you.
Yep. No worries.
You missed the opportunity to call Rudy the mayor of America.
You're right. Oh, shoot. Oh, well.
The man, the legend.
Yeah, I think he's not going to be, that's how he was remembered. I'm not sure he's going to be remembered that way.
Because he was the mayor in 2001.
Yeah, was it in 2001? Wasn't it in the early 90s?
Yeah, but he was also there when the attack on the Twin Towers happened, and he was kind of the hero afterwards.
Yeah, and also he turned New York. I mean, he turned New York City around, but until the 1980s, like from the 1950s to the 1980s, New York City had a big decline, and it became kind of dangerous, and there was all this flight to the suburbs, and then that trend turned around in like the late 80s and early 90s when he started.
Legend.
But yeah.
Love this guy.
Okay, cool. So I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.